hear from you. So let me know if you're having that trouble. We also are expecting Representative Linda Dean Campbell to join, as well as Mayor Fiorentini. And so it was important to us that we have representation for this call sort of at all layers of our government, because this really is sort of both not only a public and private effort that's going on to support businesses in Haverhill, but really it's really the confluence of these of legislation that's at the federal, state, and the local level. So thank you all. Thank you to our elected officials for joining. Representative Congresswoman Trahan, if I can turn it over to you just to make some sort of general remarks about the legislation that has been going through the federal government, and including some of which just went live last night.
You bet. So thank you, Dugan. Thank you, Kate, and all the members of the Greater Haverhill Chamber for the opportunity to join you. I've been doing a series of these across the district and with different constituent groups. So it's really important to connect so that you all know exactly what's been legislated in terms of programs and funding to keep folks afloat during this tough time. I also want to thank my local and state partners, Diana, Andy, and Mayor Fiorentini. Been so helpful and so scrappy, frankly, as we've been working on the ground with manufacturing companies that have volunteered and raised their hand to help in this national effort to try to get PPE to as many healthcare workers as we possibly can. So really appreciate that partnership. Look, this is a perilous moment for our country. We're living through unprecedented times. You know, we passed the 200,000 diagnosed cases of COVID-19 nationwide this week, including nearly 8,000 here in Massachusetts. Yesterday, we received the latest unemployment figures, a record-breaking 6.6 million people filed for unemployment. That's twice the number than the week before. So as we make our way through this difficult period, I want you to know that my office first significantly ramped up our casework. We're doing quite a bit. We were doing quite a bit before COVID-19, but now our operation is in overdrive. Folks are working from home, but they're working day and night to serve as many people as we possibly can. So just don't ever hesitate to reach out to us if you encounter folks who need help, whether that's unemployment assistance, assistance with SNAP benefits, IRS, VA healthcare, immigration and travel issues, business assistance, no matter what it is. We've actually worked with the State Department to help get almost 100 constituents who had been stranded abroad back to the United States. Many of them, you know, Peace Corps volunteers or folks on student travel or business travel. So call us if we can be of any assistance. One thing that I'd ask is that as we all proceed through this crisis, let's endeavor to demonstrate the confidence that by sticking together and looking out for one another, we will win this fight. The coronavirus pandemic and the economy are likely to get quite worse before things improve. So we need to hold fast to the knowledge that a better day is coming. And with that, I'll just briefly recap what Congress has done thus far to speed that day along. And I do think about this sequentially, and I think it's important that we all do. I mean, right now we are dealing with a public health crisis, and the priority right now is to ensure the safety of our families and our workers and our seniors, and certainly to keep folks afloat. You know, demand has essentially collapsed in our country. Supply is so limited. So during this unprecedented moment, and many of the packages that we passed, it's directed at resolving the public health crisis, restoring consumer confidence so that later we can stimulate the economy. You will never hear me call any of these packages stimulus because they're not. We can't actually do that until we have confidence and demand back in place. And so right now, these are relief packages and they are meant to keep people afloat during this very difficult time. So briefly, on March 6th, we enacted the first emergency supplemental. It included our first big burst of aid to support our care providers and state and local health boards, as well as investing substantial revenue money into creating a vaccine. Money from that $8.3 billion package is now working its way to communities. We're seeing a lot of it hit this week. And then on March 14th, we enacted the second more comprehensive package. That's the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And that one provided emergency paid leave to workers, free coronavirus testing, and it helped to initially ramp up the unemployment comp. It also supported food aid for children who are out of school due to coronavirus and needed access to a nutritious meal. It provided $300 million to our food banks and $250 million to Meals on Wheels. And then last Friday, after a long drive back and forth to Washington, I had the chance to vote on the $2.2 trillion Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. It's called the CARES Act, and it was signed into law just hours after the House passed the bill. The CARES Act is the largest relief package ever passed by Congress. It essentially sends direct cash payments to more than 150 million households. It establishes loan and grant programs for businesses to help them maintain payroll and survive the downturn. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail. I'm sure that's top of mind for all of you. In particular, it includes $350 billion for a new Paycheck Protection Program under the Small Business Administration. It includes $10 billion for SBA emergency grants for up to $10,000 to provide immediate relief for small business operating costs. And it provides $17 billion for standard SBA business operating loans, but with the promise that no payments would be due for at least 6 months. The CARES Act also expands and extends unemployment. It adds $600 to unemployment insurance for everyone who receives the state unemployment benefit. It waives the waiting week so that those in need can get help straight away. It adds 13 weeks of unemployment for those who have exhausted their state unemployment benefit. And it makes self-employed and gig economy workers eligible for UI benefits under a new federally funded program. The last big part I'll flag is the bill's $100 billion for a healthcare Marshall Plan. This is geared toward ensuring that healthcare providers are armed with everything they need to take care of those who fall ill. You know, the CARES Act was by no means a perfect bill. There were things that I believe should have been included, but weren't. Nevertheless, it's at the right scale and it's at the right size to combat the challenge before us. And there's no question we're already working on our fourth and our next package. So I haven't given up on getting more aid to those who need it. And I do think our cities are going to, our cities and towns are going to need a tranche of much needed funds. I understand that the chamber didn't receive any advanced questions. So Dugan, if you want, I can go ahead and address 3 common ones that, you know, have previously been asked by employees and employers alike. Does that make sense?
Yeah, please do, Congresswoman. I do have a couple, but those, but I also have some that I understand are ones that you have fielded repeatedly. So why don't you keep rolling? This is great.
You know, the first thing, well, the common one that we've been getting, and there haven't been sort of enough clarity. So it's a remaining question is, how are the stimulus checks going to be issued and when will they be issued? The direct cash payments, they're called recovery rebates, $1,200 for each adult, $500 for each dependent child. So those who earn $75,000 or below will get the full rebate. However, eligibility for the rebate is incrementally reduced for individuals who earn more than $75,000 or couples who filed jointly and earn more than $150,000. The incremental reduction in rebate eligibility for those earning more than $75,000 is prefigured to prevent any rebate for individual taxpayers who earn more than $99,000. So similarly, the IRS has said it anticipates providing about 60 million rebates through direct deposit in mid-April, and we're estimating that is the week of April 13th. And those deposits will be issued in reverse adjusted gross income order. So this will ensure that those who earn the least will get the rebates first. There's also been some confusion around rebate eligibility for those on Social Security. many of whom don't typically need to file a federal tax return. Despite what you may have heard, these beneficiaries will not need to file a simple tax return to get a rebate. They will receive their rebate just as they would their Social Security benefits. And if you hear a problem, please let me know about that, because we've been in close contact with SSA on this. But for other non-dependent adults who don't commonly file tax returns, the IRS expects to soon release a simple tax return. It will contain just a few questions like your name, your Social Security number, number of dependents, and deposit information. And lastly, the IRS will use the 2018 tax filing information, or for those of you who are overachievers and you've already filed your 2019 tax filings, they'll be based on this year's filing to determine the payment amount. The other one is the small businesses. How can small businesses apply for an SBA loan or loan guarantee? So there's I'll probably jump into a fair amount of detail here, just because I think this particular community is probably interested in, you know, how and where and when. Small businesses and nonprofits in the Commonwealth are eligible for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan and Grant Program, as well as the Paycheck Protection Program. So the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, or EIDL, I think many of you are familiar with it already, is SBA's only direct loan program. You aren't required to go to a third-party lender. Applicants are eligible to borrow up to $2 million. The small business interest rate on that is 3.75% and 2.75% for nonprofits. The process to apply for an EIDL is fairly simple. It's all done online. You go to SBA's coronavirus website. It's covid19relief.sba.gov. And that will bring up the loan application. From there, you'll just be asked a series of questions like, is the applicant a business with fewer than 500 employees? Is the applicant a nonprofit? Is it a franchise? What were the applicant's gross revenues during 2019? And you'll work your way through that form and then submit it. One important change that the CARES Act made to the EIDL program is that now applicants are eligible for a $10,000 advance, and the borrower will not be required to repay that advance. Super important. Alternatively, a small business can apply for a Paycheck Protection Program loan, PPP loan. This is a brand new offering that was created in the CARES Act. The PPP is a different product from an EIDL in several ways. First, the PPP isn't a direct loan from the SBA. You must apply through an SBA certified lender, such as Pentucket Bank. Second, the PPP offers loan forgiveness for the first 8 weeks of payroll. This is not an option for EIDL. The EIDL will only convert that first $10,000 advance to a grant. Third, the PPP is specifically designed to address payroll, including employees' salaries, paid sick and medical leave, and insurance premiums, as well as mortgage interest, rent, and utility payments. That's all. However, the EIDL can be used for payroll needs as well as other bills that can't be paid because of the COVID-19 outbreak. And then lastly, the maximum EIDL loan is $2 million, but the maximum loan under PPP is $10 million. So just one further note on the SBA programs. The CARES Act includes provisions to ensure that people from all backgrounds will be able to understand and access these new resources. It includes $275 million for small business development centers, women's business centers, and the Minority Business Development Agency's business centers. Additionally, the CARES Act mandates that the SBA provide its resources and services in the nation's 10 most commonly spoken languages other than English, including Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, Japanese, and Korean. So let's see. The other one I'll just highlight, and I'm so sorry to dip into other people's time. I figure if I just get all of these, commonly asked questions out, then who knows, maybe it reduces the amount of questions folks will have. There's been a considerable degree of interest about tax provisions for businesses. There's two that I'll quickly highlight. First, there is a provision allowing employers to delay paying their portion of FICA taxes for employees through the end of the year. It's important to note that this is just a delay. It's not a payroll tax holiday. All 2020 deferred amounts would be due before the end of 2022. Additionally, employers who use the new Paycheck Protection Program would be ineligible. Second, the CARES Act includes an employee retention credit. This provision is designed to provide an incentive for employers to keep employees on staff through the end of the year, even if the business is partially or fully closed due to COVID-19. That situation is obviously very common here in Massachusetts. An employer with 100 or fewer employees and whose business has been greatly reduced or suspended is eligible for a refundable payroll tax credit of up to $5,000 per employee. That refundable credit is available for each employee regardless of whether they were furloughed. However, if the employee has more than 100 employees, then the tax credit is only available for those employees who were furloughed. Again, that's because the tax credit is designed to keep the employees employed rather than collecting unemployment and without health insurance. So I hope that this overview has been useful. If there's still time, I'd be happy to squeeze in questions, provided I'm not encroaching on Senator DiZoglio's time.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for that. I do believe that that's all very much relevant, and I think it's a good springboard for the conversation that we'll have with the other elected officials. I do want to I'll just pull one or two questions out of the chats that have been coming through here, since I am watching them come through live. There's one specific question: does the PPP covered payroll? And I'll mention that because it just launched last night at around midnight, and there is some time sensitivity for people. Does the covered payroll include owner's draw if owners are paid regularly through payroll? Another question, Congresswoman, depending on which one is best for you to respond to. I filed for unemployment for self-employed and have not heard for almost a week. Any direction that you want to offer people here? That might also be something.
I'll take the last one first. So absolutely, if you're self-employed, if you're a contractor, if you're a part-time employee, you are eligible for these extended and expanded UI benefits. So we have been hearing reports that there's just a backlog, right? I mean, the SBA used to have like a book of business that was like 24 million. Now it's 360. And I do think that there's going to be some issues in that ramp. And, we allotted funds for the SBA to add those resources, but I just think between us passing it last Friday and them putting these programs into place, there's going to be some snags. And we've been in touch with the Treasury Department to make sure that these direct cash payments are going out on time and that these SBA loans are getting into the hands of our small businesses urgently. So stay with it. If you do encounter a problem, it's not because you're not eligible. It could just be because of an obvious backload, but call our office and we're happy to help. And for those of you who don't, everyone's working from home, but our main number is actually automatically forwarded to, a few key people, and we rotate that around our staff, but it's 978-459-0101, 459-0101. Oh, and then the other question was, I'm sorry, I forget it.
You know what? I'm going to give you a time to just get a glass of water or take a sip of coffee.
All right, thank you.
So, Congresswoman, thank you so much. I also want to be respectful of your time. We'd love to keep you on here, but I'll also understand if at any point you need to sign off as well. I want to give, a lot of these questions are obviously relevant at the state and local level as well. So I think what I'm going to do is invite Senator DiZoglio to actually comment to that last one. It sounds like you have some additional context.
Yeah, first of all, good morning to everyone. Great to see everybody on here and all the participants. And thank you especially to, obviously, the Greater Haverhill Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring this and coordination and getting all of the elected officials together to assist in these conversations. I think it's really, really important that we stay connected. Thank you to Congresswoman Trahan for all of your insight into what's happening at the federal level. Wow, you just explained pretty much everything that we have been talking about with our constituents for the last couple of weeks here. And thank you for that, serving up the meat and potatoes of what's going on at the federal level. I don't want, for the sake of, not repeating what you said, I'm just going to highlight a couple of different things because a lot of what we're doing at the state level is along the same lines of what you're doing at the federal level. And we at the state level are essentially implementing a lot of the different things that you've just passed in the CARE Act, amongst other things that you've already mentioned, and did a great job of explaining and breaking down, how those things were voted on and what has actually been approved at the federal level. At the local level here, here in the Merrimack Valley, I think just to take the last thing that, you got a question about, unemployment insurance, unemployment benefits. One of the questions that we've been getting that Dugan actually was just, texting me saying, hey, I'm getting questions about this, is what's the difference between unemployment insurance and unemployment benefits? Very simple. Unemployment insurance, in layman's terms, is just the program that you pay into as an employer, as the business, or as the employee, you pay into the system. And then the unemployment benefits are what you receive back from that program. So there's the UI program, and then there are the unemployment benefits that you receive out of that program. Regarding the reason why some people have been having so much difficulty in actually receiving some of the benefits that they are indeed entitled to, is because the state has been having significant challenges in keeping up with what has been approved at the federal level. Normally what you see during the legislative process is you see bills get approved, they go through the process of being, either passed in the House, passed in the Senate, and then signed off by the administration. When they're signed off by the administration, there's usually a date of implementation for when those things that were approved will be implemented. The reason why there's usually a date for when those things will be implemented is because it's understood, generally speaking, that it takes time to figure out how we're going to implement all of the policies that were just voted on into law, where the money is going to come from, how those people are going to get trained, where those new employers are going to be housed, so on and so forth. Right now what's happening is you have day to day in a very fluid system and process, these policies getting passed and signed into law, and then it's not really a matter of, setting a later date for when they're going, the due date is for their implementation. It's mostly been, as soon as is humanly possible, we need to get these things done. So in the state of Massachusetts, what's happening right now, according to the administration, is we have actually been advised not to, if you're having problems with the UI system and getting into it, first of all, call our offices. My phone number is 978-984-7747. That is our office cell. My email is diana.desoglio@masenate.gov. I will help to guide you through the process, or a member of my team will help to guide you through the process if you are having issues applying for your benefits, or any of your employers are having issues applying for those benefits. We will contact the Department of Unemployment Assistance. We will guide you through that and assist your small business with those concerns and with those potential technical issues that you're having with the system. One of the reasons why you might be having an issue applying is, I saw one of these questions on here. I believe there's a lot of questions coming up. But what do you do if you get a 1099? If you're DBA, doing business as, if you're an LLC, if you're a sole proprietor, self-employed in any way, shape, or form, which is a lot of you. The system has not been set up yet to actually handle your requests. You're not yet in the system. So what the governor has said is wait, do not apply yet. And when they can get the system here in Massachusetts to align with what was approved at the federal level, hopefully as soon as is humanly possible, they are going to retroactively make sure that you get the benefits that you're entitled to. So he has advised everyone not to be concerned that because you're not able to apply, don't be concerned that every day that passes, you're not going to get those benefits that you're entitled to. You have now been approved according to the federal guidelines that have been set forth in the CARES Act. You will get unemployment benefits, as the Congresswoman said, based on your last filed tax return. It's just a matter of making sure that the system in Massachusetts, technically speaking, is on par with what was just approved at the federal level, and that's taking some time. There's been an influx of workers that have been hired in the unemployment, in the Department of Unemployment Assistance, but those people are being trained as quickly as possible, and the services are being set up. So thank you for your patience. This is all unprecedented, and we've been taking our cues from the administration about when these things will be available. Again, if you have any questions or need help in any way, all it takes is a phone call to our office, and we'll assist you through the process.
Senator,
Yes.
please, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. Do you have a question?
No. I wanted to say, I'm also, first of all, thank you for your comments. I want to turn in a moment to Representative Vargas and Representative Campbell, who represent the vast majority of Haverhill.
Great. I will just two more things
Please,
really
ahead,
quickly,
Senator.
and I'll be quick with this because I know we have other people and I want to make sure we get an opportunity. Regarding the payment protection program that's going on at the federal level, I am part of the Senate's Economic Impact Working Group. I am currently the lead sponsor of a bill that we're filing that would try to extend payment protection program like benefits, but at the state level, to any small business that has not been approved at the federal level to qualify for those federal benefits. Dispensaries, amongst others, are worried that they're not going to qualify for these loan to grant opportunities that are being made available at the federal level because they're allowed to do business in Massachusetts, but the federal government has not recognized them as a business. So we are working on that. If you are a business that is having an issue applying and you do not qualify for some of these federal benefits, just know that we are working on the economic impact subgroup to address those concerns at the state level. Also, the takeout options for beer and wine that Dugan, thank you, at the Greater Haverhill Chamber of Commerce for leading that, along with Jason from Kruger's and other restaurants. We have actually gotten that bill for these restaurants on the governor's desk. Yesterday, that bill landed on the governor's desk to provide these takeout options for these restaurants to assist them in increasing their revenue and increasing their sales, to do everything we can to keep them in business during these times. We are just waiting for the governor's signature. Hopefully that will be done today in time for you to do business with that this weekend. And then I will close with the fact that the Mass Cultural Council did just approve for gig workers at the state level in the state of Massachusetts. If you're registered as a state gig worker, if you're an artist of any kind, if you are a musician, anybody like that that's working in our communities that is self-employed or other, or you're part of a nonprofit, but you've lost some revenue, I strongly encourage you to visit massculturalcouncil.org to see if you qualify for receiving one of their grants, for applying for one of their grants. They're giving $1,000 right now to individual workers who are self-employed or other that qualify for receiving those grants that are artists, gig workers, musicians, and the like, and nonprofits. My office is available to help, assist to guide you through the process once again, but that was just made available yesterday. And with that, I know we have a lot of people to hear from, so thank you. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Senator. Let me just I want to turn it over to Representative Vargas and Representative Campbell in just a moment here. I'm reading a lot of the questions and comments, and I think it's just a good moment to remind everybody that we've got this conversation going until about noon. At 1 p.m., we have assembled a panel of people on the ground, local lenders, attorneys, people who are working real time at the truly where the rubber hits the road, to understand how they can help each of you who are dealing with myriad, very specific situations in your businesses. And so I want to remind everybody to please join us at 1 o'clock, because we're going to have an opportunity to really get into some of the nuanced questions here that, based on the pace of everything, that perhaps even our elected leaders who are part of this legislation haven't actually been able to sort through entirely. So with that, let me turn it over to Rep. Vargas, and good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
Congresswoman,
Thank you, Congresswoman, for being
be
here.
well, be
Thank
safe.
you.
Thanks for all your great work.
Thank you, Dugan, and I will be brief. You don't want to give politicians the open floor for too long. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here. I won't repeat what has been said already, but I will quickly rattle off a couple of other key points of information that might be helpful for small businesses. Number one, on utilities. Early on in the administration, the DPU put out a moratorium on utilities shutting off service on the residential side. Our delegation and several other folks across the Commonwealth urged that to be applied to the commercial side as well. And so now if you have utilities and you are a small business and you want to defer that payment until a brighter day, you are able to do that without incurring fees or interest or anything else that would otherwise apply if you have a delayed payment for your utilities. So keep that in mind. Number two, at the state, there's also tax deferment for sales and meals tax and occupancy taxes. So make sure you take a look at that. The senator already mentioned the takeout dining, which is great. And lastly, my office, along with 55 other legislators, we led a letter to the Division of Insurance asking them to, number one, waive liquor liability payments since nobody's consuming alcohol on site right now. And number two, to not consider the COVID-19 pandemic an act of God for force majeure and people who have business interruption insurance. We've heard from folks across the entire Commonwealth on this issue that they're worried that their business interruption insurance could get affected by the fact that some insurers might qualify this as an act of God. And so we want to make sure that the Division of Insurance does not qualify it as such, so that if you do have business interruption insurance, you could qualify for that. So those are the quick and dirty. I will also mention on unemployment, the number one reason that our office sees that people fail to correctly fill out their unemployment is because they don't put their employer name exactly as it is on their W-2. So for example, if a person works at Dunkin' Donuts, they're not employed by Dunkin' Donuts, they're employed by that franchise, whatever that franchise is called. So if you're applying for unemployment, please make sure that the employer is the exact name that you have on your W-2 to help expedite the process. As everyone else has mentioned, feel free to reach out to our office. We've been triaging and helping folks as much as possible. We've also set up a form called tinyurl.com/Haverhill support, where you can fill out information if, number one, you need help, or number two, you're able to provide help and want to volunteer and help others. And with the information we get on the back end, we connect people to resources that they need or resources that they're able to provide. Our remote office number is 978-228-1233. And looking forward to continuing to be of service in any way we can.
Rep, thank you so much. Representative Campbell, welcome and thank you for also being part of this and for your work in the community. Can I leave it over to you to just sort of fill in? I know that that all of you at the state level are working very, very hard to understand how this legislation is going to impact the local level. And so, but I want to, any other details that you want to fill in based on what Rep. Vargas, Senator DiZoglio, and Congresswoman Trahan has mentioned.
Well, thank you, Dugan, and thank you for what you're doing to support the local businesses and, you know, the information that you're providing that's readily available so that folks can do that. I mean, we only need the basics right now, right? And we can get them all locally. And I just think that that's so important as we help these businesses stand until this is done. And if we can do that, we'll be doing a great job. And Congresswoman, I just want to thank you for your continued outreach and providing us the information that we need to pass on to others. And of course, our team in the Merrimack Valley of state legislators. And so the only thing I'll add, Dugan, is that we want to make sure that businesses understand that the tax delay from Massachusetts is not just for those very small businesses for, you know, that pay $150K in taxes. There was, you know, a big outreach on that simply because, you know, your average restaurant with their liquor sales is gonna reach that at a very quick point in time. So that, is for all small businesses. I think that's an important point. And the only other thing that I would add is Mass Hire is also helping a lot of folks individually with a lot of the specific questions that they have. And of course, I think when folks are running into roadblocks, if they can contact one of us, it's usually a big time saver for them to get really the detailed information that they need. And just to follow up, we've had an awful lot of people call us who are sole proprietors, like a hairdresser that has one employee. And it's going to be about a week before those folks can apply for their assistance. So I wanted to put that out and just emphasize that as well. But that is coming, and I think that's going to help a lot of folks in the Merrimack Valley that, for example, do home repair, many of those type of jobs. So anyway, thank you again for what you're doing. And, I just encourage folks to reach out for help because there are folks that have the specifics to help them.
Rep, thank you so much. And thank you for all you're doing. I see that the work that everybody's doing, both at the state and federal level. And we appreciate everything that you're going through on behalf of the city. Mayor Fiorentini, you're on the line. I want to welcome you, sir. And thank you for also the work that you're doing in Haverhill. If you can hear me, I want to give you a chance to just sort of offer some general comments regarding the response the city has taken with respect to the impact that the coronavirus has had on our small business community.
Thanks, Dugan. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine, sir.
Okay, great. What the city is offering is a series of deferrals on taxes. Real estate taxes will now be due on June 1st instead of May 1st, and without any interest or penalties. The state has extended excise taxes, I think somebody mentioned that, until April 23rd. There'll be no interest or penalties if paid by that date. The water and wastewater bills, which were already out and due on March 2nd, we're not charging any late fees if they're paid by May 1st. There's another set of bills to be sent out on May 1st. Normally they'd be due on June 1st. We're giving people an extra month to pay. They'll be due on July 1st. We're being very lenient with shut-offs, and if there's any problem there, please let us know or let me know personally. If you pay online, we're waiving any of the charges that people normally get from their credit card company. The city will pick them up. Parking downtown, as most of you know, we've waived all the parking fees, and we are still enforcing the 10-minute free signs that we've put up in front of the restaurants downtown. There is proposed state legislation which will allow the state to delay the payment of the meals tax until June 20th. We've set up our 311 program. I think some of them might be online listening right now to answer any questions people might have. The city website has a great program set up by the Teachers Union and a number of not-for-profits. Just go onto the city website and you'll see it. It's called the MASH program, which will allow people who wish to volunteer to help with those who need assistance. And finally, we're setting up through the Citizen Center and our 311 program, a home delivery program for people who are at risk, elderly people, sick people, who are unable to get food. They don't want to go out to the market. To a limited extent, we'll be able to pick the food up for them and deliver. Thanks, Dugan. And thank you for doing this, by the way. This is very helpful.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Mayor, I have a quick, I'm going to field one question from the chat and send it your way. It's specific to parking fees. Are downtown street parking fees being waived as well, or just a lot? It sounds as though there may have been some cars that were getting tickets yesterday, at least the appearance of tickets. Any comment on that, Mayor?
There are no fees to park downtown. If people are being given tickets, it's for exceeding either the 10-minute spot in the takeout or for parking over the 2-hour limit. We're still enforcing the 2-hour limit on the street. We don't want to put our downtown businesses out of business by having commuters and residents park there all day long.
Great, Mayor. Thank you. I have, there's another question here that I think I want to put out to this group, and again, I'll probably raise this again because it's a good example of, I think probably it's somewhat specific, but it has, it's relevant to not only this call, but the one at 1 p.m. Let me just sort of put it out there, and then I don't know how Zoom operates and for each of our representatives to actually raise their hand, but maybe just raise your hand. Let me throw this out there. We're a small female-founded, owned and run small business. We do all of our banking through one of the big national banks. In this case, it's Bank of America, and are being told we cannot apply for PPP through them because we do not already have a line of credit, despite having 3 different business bank accounts. It seems that we're unable to apply through any bank. If our own bank won't allow us to apply, how do we go about applying in order to participate in the PPP program? Again, I don't want to put anybody on the spot for this, if this is really a question for our lenders at 1 p.m., but I am seeing a number of questions that are coming through that are relating to sort of the process around PPP.
I think you can, oh, sorry. I think any one of us will say potentially the same thing, and they can add to this, of course. I think that this is a case-by-case issue, and that if they're having challenges applying and going through the process, because this has been very fluid, I think the best way that we can assist is just by contacting one of our offices, whoever you might have a connection with. I know Rep. Campbell's here, Rep. Vargas is here, or myself and my office are happy to assist through the process. And the lenders obviously will be on in a couple of minutes. But go ahead, Rep. Vargas.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think it's really important for everybody that's on here that has questions about this SBA loans to be on that video conference at 1 o'clock. The banks are going to have the most information that's most up to date. On a lot of these things, we're waiting on the federal government to actually give us the guidance. They can pass a law, but then actually implementation is the most difficult part. And so up until last night, we were waiting on some of that guidance, and the banks were as well. And my understanding is that they did get it last night. Pentucket Bank must have been one of the first to actually start processing some of those at 1 o'clock in the morning. So if you have questions related to the SBA, Mayor, I love that background. You're in San Francisco. But if you have questions, please be on that 1 o'clock webinar. I think it's going to be really important.
Great. Thanks, Rep. Rep. Campbell, any other comments? Oh, you're on mute.
Rep, you're on mute.
Is that better?
Much
better. So yeah, the only thing that I would say is listening to the news last night, the national news, the Treasury Secretary said, hey, listen, we got this guidance out, and you always have to wait at least 24 hours beyond the time that they say it will be received. And so I would say that most likely in this particular case, it's that her particular lending facility has not gone through all of the guidance, especially if it sounds like it's a larger bank. They just haven't processed it yet. And I think that if it continues to be a problem in the next 24 hours, I would definitely say reach out to someone. But I would say that a lot of the banks are really processing this, and just it's taken time.
And just real quick, Dugan, I see another question related to this. Denise is asking if, I believe if an employer that pays themselves through their business, can that count as payroll? Our understanding is that yes, payroll of all your employees, but also if your company pays you, that also counts as payroll. And through the PPP program, you can get 100% of your payroll plus 25%. Which is what Senator Markey and Senator Warren indicated on a conference call this week.
great. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to spend with us this morning. I want to thank Congresswoman Trahan and her team for also being part of this. We do have our call.
I'm so sorry. I just want to make sure that I just address this one more thing that's here that I think is really important for a lot of employers before we go. Michael Lanzine, my business is not completely shut down, but I'm down 70 to 90%, and he wants to keep operating at that capacity. Michael and others who have this issue, there is something called the WorkShare program that is part of the unemployment insurance system. And what it is it's a program in which if you are not completely shut down or your workers are still working, but they're working only part of what they were originally working, whether it's part of their part-time or part of what they used to have as full-time. If they're working less than what they used to work, please check out the Work Share program in the UI system. Again, my office is happy to help you, but that Work Share program allows you to collect benefits, or to apply for benefits at least, to get those benefits for the portion of work that you're no longer doing, but still collect the income for the work that you are doing. So it splits that difference so that you're able to collect those unemployment benefits for what you've lost, but you can still keep working for what you're able to do using technology or, social distancing, whatever you're allowed to do under the current restrictions. Check that program out and contact me if you have questions. Sorry to interrupt you again. I thought that was important, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks, Senator. That's great. One other question here as I'm going through it is if you could actually talk about will this delay the state's timeline for actually creating its budget?
Yes, Dugan, I'll jump in there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've had our budget meetings with our respective leadership, and absolutely, it will delay the process substantially, and so I think we're going to have to see where revenues are, and there's no way for us to ascertain where those are going to be at this point in time. And so we'll likely have a lot of revenue hearings ongoing, starting in a month or so, but it's going to take a while for us to get a feel for the revenue picture, without a doubt. So I would say, everything that we've put in, it's on the shelf, right? And we're pretty much going to start over with the budget process for sure.
Yep, understood. Understood. One other question for all of you, since we do have a couple more minutes here. And again, I want to be respectful of everybody's questions and comments that have been coming through. We are going to track them. And again, I just want to put a plug in for 1:00 p.m. It's the same login credentials. Please join us then. Earl Durham from Supporting Strategies, along with leadership from several of our local banks and law firms who have been really dealing to understand many details of all of the state and federal legislation that has come through. That's going to be covered at 1:00 p.m. I just want to give any of our elected officials a chance to comment on anything that they need from us as a community, things that we can be doing to support not only the small businesses, but just sort of as a general, what can we do for our government at the local and state level?
Dugan, I think we really appreciate right now, all of us, the constant contact that you're keeping with all of us. We don't know what the issues are until they're highlighted to us. And I know I've had several constituents call and apologize that they're calling and say, I'm so sorry to bother you. I don't want to feel like I'm complaining. I know that there are so many people that need more than, or have bigger issues than this, but please don't hesitate to call us. It's never being taken as a complaint. We don't know what the issues and challenges are that you're facing unless you contact us and unless you highlight the gaps in the system. What's happening now a lot is that the administration is rolling out, new guidelines daily, and we'll see these press conferences with the governor, or so on and so forth, with the president. And we as legislators and the local elected officials as well are getting word about new programs that are implemented at the same time that you all are getting them. And then what's happening is people are contacting our offices and they're letting us know about some of the issues that are in those programs that have been rolled out that need to be addressed, and some of the gaps that are in those programs that have just been rolled out. And we take those concerns that you let us know about, we bring them right back to the administration or to the agency that's conducting and facilitating the new programs, Department of Unemployment Assistance, for example, and we're talking to them and we're letting them know, hey, I had 5 people call me today and say that this is an issue, you guys need to work on this. But we're only able to do that if people keep on telling us what the issues are so that we can address them together. So please keep contacting us. You're not complaining. We love hearing from you. We love hearing from the chambers, and we're able to best do our jobs when you contact us and let us know that there are some issues that need to be addressed. So thank you all for keeping in touch with us and allowing us to better do our jobs on your behalf on Beacon Hill.
Thanks, Dugan. And I'll just add to that. in addition to reaching out to our offices for constituent services, if you have advice or any guidance on legislation that you think we should be looking at, certainly let us know. I know one of the things that Congresswoman Trahan has made clear is that this is just the first federal package that has gone through, but we're going to do multiple ones. And so as they go through that, it's going to be important for us to relay to them and our entire federal delegation what we need. I know one of the things that my office is hearing from some essential businesses is that, yes, while the $600 in extra money for unemployment is essential and great for people who don't have work, for those that are still essential employees, for some of them, it's sort of disincentivizing going to work because an extra $600 on top of the unemployment might actually be way more than what they're making as an essential worker. And of course, we can get into all sorts of debates on that, but that's critical feedback for us to have so that the federal government understands what is actually happening on the ground when they pass this type of legislation, and that we ensure that the support that they're intending to get to the right people actually gets to the right people. And then lastly, there's a role for all of us to play at the local level while we wait for federal relief to come down. If you're buying products, if you're moving your business more towards a digital environment, think about what local companies can help you exercise that. What freelancers are available locally, creatives, video producers, graphic designers, people who are available here in Haverhill that can help you carry out a new business model or a new marketing strategy. Think about buying local, going to bodegas, doing whatever you can to keep local money in the local economy. So I'll just close with that.
Thank you.
Dugan,
Yes, Brett.
I would just add to that one thing that I'm hearing in my office from businesses more perhaps of a medium size, and I would love for you to keep your ear to the ground on this. And get feedback from folks. Do I try and rehire? Is it really going to be detrimental to me under some federal assistance if I rehire? That's a tough question for a lot of perhaps larger, medium-sized businesses. And so I would love for you to keep an eye on that, because these are the things that we're going to have to tweak as we go along. We certainly don't want to provide disincentives, for folks, not to hire, but in some cases that might not make any sense. And there are other vehicles to help them, but I would appreciate if you would, really get into the nitty gritty of that when you are, talking to business owners. And I would say the second area that is tangential to this is the area of foreclosures. And so we have to continue to extend that. And I think that is going to be a challenge for us at both the state and the federal levels. We certainly need to do more in that regard, because that will have, a big impact on local businesses as well. We did a few things, but there's a lot more that has to be done so that folks don't lose their property. And if you could keep your ear to the ground on that too, that would be really helpful.
Thank you. One other question, because this has obviously been at the top of the very busy news feed this week, is healthcare professionals getting the proper protective equipment. I know that Southwick is jumping in with both feet. We have people online like Chris White from Creative Pult who are making 3D printing gear out of his shop on Essex Street. Is there any other direction or things that the general public should be thinking about in terms of making sure that we are, moving with warlike footing to make sure that we're supportive of whatever resources our community needs, either as a manufacturer for resources for people who need these things well beyond Haverhill, or within the community, our local hospitals and healthcare workers?
Yes, I can touch on that. There's a couple of things that manufacturers can do. If you think that you have a facility that could be converted into one that produces PPE, there's a form that the command center has set up where you can fill out all your information. Part of what the command center is going to have to do is analyze which companies are closest to actually being able to produce without investing a lot of time and money and capital to be able to convert their facility. Last week, we handed out about 3,500 N95 masks to local hospitals through donations at Holy Family, Lawrence General, a few of the nursing homes here as well, and about 1,500 surgical masks. If you have any of those masks at your house, if you have any of those masks in your businesses, please consider donating them to your local hospitals or your local nursing homes, because they are in need of them still. While we wait for that federal stockpile to come in and the state orders to come in, we can do everything we can at the local level to actually supply them with that bridge to get them to the point where the federal relief actually comes in. And that seems to be the theme with a lot of sort of the federal relief, whether it's economic, whether it's PPE, whether it's health. We can do things locally in the short term to make sure that we get to the long term where the federal relief comes in.
And I would just add to that, this is actually, so I saw one of the questions about the healthcare workers. My mother's a nurse, and I'm very worried about this as well. Personally speaking, so I know, a lot of friends in the community are struggling with the same thing about worrying about their family and their loved ones going into these facilities, and all of them are nothing short of true heroes in our community right now for doing this. We absolutely need to get them the PPE that they need to be able to do their jobs in a safe manner. And right now, like Representative Vargas said, he listed all of the different, methods that you can, as a manufacturer, make sure that you're letting the government know about, offerings of personal protective equipment that you might have. But in addition to that, I would just say that there are bills circulating right now. I'm a co-sponsor of one of them. I'm sure that the reps are sponsoring, either the same bill or a version of it that is requesting that these frontline healthcare workers receive hazard pay right now. In addition to us fighting tooth and nail to make sure that they get the PPE that they need. So there are a lot of different efforts that are happening at the state level. I know the Congresswoman's working on the same issue right now, but just know that you are heard and that your legislators are working really hard to make sure that these people in particular are getting the resources that they need to safely and effectively do their job, and that they are compensated for doing that job in the way that they should be.
Thanks, Senator. Great. Well, it's just noon right now. I encourage everybody to go grab some lunch. I do hope that we'll see a similar audience back here at 1 o'clock when we will have local lenders. The panel will be moderated by Earl Durham, who's an accountant leading supporting strategies in the Merrimack Valley. We'll have representatives from several of our local banks, including Pentucket Bank and Haverhill Bank. Our attorney, Paul Magliochetti, will be on the line as well. So we'll be offering both lending and banking as well as legal expertise. Elizabeth Brady will be on too. So anyway, Mayor, Representatives, Senator, thank you so much for your time. And please be safe and keep us posted, and we'll continue to do the same for all of you. Our chamber has a COVID-19 page. It's at haverhillchamber.com. We have recorded this webinar. We're also going to be able to capture all of the different chat comments and questions. And so we'll eventually get those loaded onto our website, haverhillchamber.com, as well as our social media. So thanks to everybody again, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Dugan.
Thank you.
Nice job, Dugan.
Thanks, Rep. Thanks, Senator.
Thank you, Dugan. Thanks to all. Talk to you guys soon.
Bye.
You do good. I'll hop on that call early this afternoon. That way, if we get anybody on early and they have a few questions popping in, we can address a few.
Great.
Even
I'll be
before
on
the
in
meeting.
about 45 minutes, Earl. That sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Very good.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. and I'm sure they're going to come up here. So let me first welcome everybody to the 1 o'clock information session here. In a few seconds, I'm going to kick it off to my friend and partner, Earl Durham, who is moderating this discussion. Earl is a principal at Supporting Strategies and oversees the Merrimack Valley. Supporting Strategies is a bookkeeping and accounting firm that does a great job supporting the back end of a lot of small businesses in our community. And he's very much living on the front lines of trying to make heads or tails of the different stimulus packages that have been brought through at the state and federal level. So he's going to be leading our conversation. I want to quickly thank my friends and fellow panelists, John Dowse with Pentucket Bank, Elizabeth Brady with Commonwealth Financial Partners, Attorney Paul Magliochetti, and Jim Hennebree with Haverhill Bank. For those of you who are listening, we're streaming this also on Facebook Live. And if you have anybody, if you happen to be on Facebook or have any friends that you think might be interested in participating in this, let them know that we are putting this on Facebook Live. So any support you can provide us for the next hour and getting the audience as big as possible would be great. So one other housekeeping item, there's two ways of communicating on Zoom webinars. We do not, our audience is muted. We have over almost 100 people at this point who are tuned in. So just for logistics, we do limit the communication to the panel via chatting, and there's a Q&A chat tab at the bottom of the Zoom. We encourage everybody, if you do have specific questions for the panel, to use the Q&A function and not the chat. And with that, I will thank everybody for listening in. We are live. We are recording this as well, and we will be recording the questions that do come up here. So, and all that will live on our social media and website at haverhillchamber.com. So with that, thanks. And Earl, over to you, sir.
All right, well, thanks, Dugan, for the opportunity. It's obviously a hot topic in our business community. And first of all, I just want to wish everybody well. Hopefully their friends, families, and coworkers, et cetera, are all safe. And as business owners, we also wish that for all of our employees as well. So we're going through some trying times here, and the government has stepped up with a lot of programs that in some ways have disrupted our lives, and in other ways are trying to offer some financial assistance to try to mitigate that as much as they can. And before we get too far into this, I'd like to just ask each of the panelists to do a real brief introduction of themselves, who they're with, and what their role is, and then I'll circle back with some more specific questions. So John, would you mind starting us off?
Sure, thanks, Earl. John Dowse, I'm the Chief Credit Officer at Pentucket Bank. And we're in business processing applications right now. So taking an hour out to go through how folks can get ready to process those, get them into the queue with really any of their banks and bankers. And we're hopeful that there's some brilliance in the SBA and government strategy here. There's been some hiccups, but the program makes some sense, and we need to get the money out to folks that need it. So glad to be on the panel today.
All right, thank you, John. And Jim?
Jim Hennebree, VP Haverhill Bank. Same boat as John. We are getting as much information to our customers as possible regarding the PPP program, so we can start processing these and get some funds to them.
Very good. And Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Brady, a financial planner with Commonwealth Financial Group. We're a Boston-based agency under the Mass Mutual umbrella. We've been reaching out to not only individuals but businesses, because there's so much information out and it's coming fast and furious, and the markets are all over the place. So it's always good to partner up with a planner or an advisor to help navigate these waters. So I'm based here in Haverhill most of the time, and one of our biggest focus are sole proprietors and nonprofits.
All right, thank you very much. And Paul?
Thank you. Attorney Paul Magliochetti with the firm of Sheehan, Jutras and Magliochetti here in Haverhill. My partner Bob Jutras and I have immersed ourselves in both the loan programs this week, applying for ourselves and taking care of numerous clients that are trying to figure their way through this process, which has been evolving. And And I'd like to say, you know, I think the local banks have done an incredible job reaching out to their customers in the community, keeping them informed, which has also triggered a lot of calls to our office, which I guess I shouldn't complain about. But I think it's great that we're having this conversation with the local business people, because we're the ones that the people that are receiving the loans are looking to for counsel and advice.
Very good. And just a way of an introduction of myself, at Supporting Strategies, we provide outsourced bookkeeping and controller services for businesses. And our main function is to help business owners with their day-to-day financials, create monthly financial statements, keep them in compliance, and help them with what really is important right now is cash flow. And I think even in all times in your business cycle, cash flow is probably the most important thing a business owner needs to manage. You know, you need to make payroll, you need to be able to maintain that in order to service your clients. So I often say that the three most important financial statements that a business owner should look at are cash flow, and cash flow. And all of us right now are feeling the pinch of a cash flow impact into their business. And unfortunately for most businesses, it's very negative. There are a few right now, and I have a few clients that are just booming right now as they're supplying equipment in the healthcare industry, et cetera. But you've got to manage cash flow, whether you're growing really quickly or in a situation like this where your revenue streams are getting, you know, interrupted. So I want to remind everybody that while the main point of this conversation is the PPP process, the Paycheck Protection Program that was put in place on the act that came out as part of the CARES Act that came out last Friday, there's other avenues in there to manage cash flow. It shouldn't just be about getting a stopgap loan. So keep that in mind. And as you're working through your financial, make sure you have a financial plan that includes going through your cash flow statements and doing some what if analysis and understanding the pros and cons of furloughing employees or not, taking a loan or not, how that's going to help you, go through that process. So with that said, I think most of the questions today are likely to be centered around the PPM. So I wanted to start off, John, by having you talk a little bit about the fact that we just got this regulation last night. I literally got a copy about 7 o'clock last night, and we sent out notices to all of our clients saying, here's what changes just happened that were different than what we saw just a few days ago from the original act when it came out. So John, can you talk a little bit about what you guys did to prep for that and where you're at in terms of being able to accept applications?
Yep, thanks, Earl. And I'll speak for Pentucket Bank, but I'm guessing, and Jim, you can tell me whether I've got it right or not. I think most banks would answer similarly. We were, up until last night, we were operating under the guidance that the Treasury and, the bill came out of Congress, went to the Treasury, and then went to the SBA. So as in each step of the way, it got more specific. And, kind of the grenade got tossed in the SBA's foxhole, I don't know, a week ago, and they had to create an app for, millions of small businesses in the country. They've been reacting, and we did finally get the SOP yesterday evening. I think it came out at about 6. The application was made live a little after midnight, but it didn't work quite yet. We found that it started working sometime between 2 a.m. when we gave up and 6 a.m. when we came back. So the app is live now. The SOP is pretty clear. It puts the onus on applicants, business owners, to fill the application out, certify to the accuracy of the statements made in it. It largely holds the lenders harmless. We're going to try to verify as much of the information as possible, but it's putting that onus on borrowers and business owners, which is kind of brilliant. The banks want to make the loans, but a lot of these are kind of tenuous, right? Businesses are in a tough spot. We need the government guarantees to get a lot of this money out into the hands of small business owners. They did a good job, I think, of providing that coverage. So at this point, it's about getting I know we're going to get more specific about how to get applications in and what those specifics are. But the SOP is pretty clear. We've been guessing at it up until 6 p.m. last night. We guessed fairly accurately, so we were able to operate pretty quickly once it came out.
Very good. Jim, anything to add to that?
No, I think John's spot on. I mean, it was a lot of unknowing, a lot of talking to attorneys, accountants, borrowers and the SBA if they would return our calls, just to, again, get the correct information gathered as quick as possible so we could get that to our customers and making sure they don't have to fill out the application 2-3 times. So customers have been great. It seems like people are getting a lot smarter with how the program works. And so whether that's the media or the Treasury or the SBA or either way, again, John's correct. Yes.
All right, thank you. So Paul, the document came out 31 pages last night. I know it took me at least 2 or 3 iterations of reading it to really try to understand what the changes were versus the act that was 882 pages long that came out just a few days before. You got any comments about what you noticed in the way of changes that came in through this last iteration, and any other comments around that?
Well, I'm glad they summarized it down to 31 pages. And a lot of what's in here is actually what I've been dialoguing with the banks as this has been evolving. You can tell that the notifications they've been getting are basically implemented in this. So I think one thing that I've been impressed with is that the communication between the SBA, the government, the SBA, and the local banks has been pretty good, because even though we've been trying to figure this out, this program came together very quickly. And to get it summarized to the point where they have in this shorter period of time says a lot. And the one thing I'd like to stress about this program, and I don't think I'm wrong, but I think this is the first time in history that a federal bailout program actually trickles down to the average guy on the street. I mean, where my firm's able to apply, I represent a lot of small businesses, contractors, and they're able to benefit from these packages. This is very different from the bailouts we had in the past, that the bulk of the money went to these large corporations and banks and financial institutions. And I think that says a lot about where we are as a nation right now. And it speaks a lot about our delegation in Washington that really worked hard to have this money trickle down to the average guy on the street.
Yeah, to me, I've been amazed by how fast this is all going through. John and Jim, could one of you comment on how quickly you think people will actually see the proceeds from these loans?
Jim, you want to start?
John, I think, yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead and start.
No, I was going to say, I think John can answer that better, as they are already submitting these applications, and we're about to, so.
Okay. It's a good question. I wish I had a black and white answer. It's still a little gray. So the kind of mentioned, Congress passes the act, Treasury defines it, SBA creates the process. They created the process with the SOP that came out, we've referenced here last night. That SOP is about qualifying applications and structuring them. It now needs to move to the, all right, how do we document it and fund it? It hasn't exactly. Now we're all SBA lenders. We've done it 100 times, 1,000 times. We know generally how to do that. This is a very different program. So we have a bunch of approvals that we've processed today. We've told our customers, hey, you're approved under the program. You're probably going to need to give us till Monday or so to fund you. I'm anticipating additional SOP from the SBA tonight and over the weekend that'll give us a little more guidance. If we don't get it, we'll do it the way we have with all the other programs. There's, we're kind of making it up. We'll make it up consistent with the way we've done SBA loans for, all the way along. But we haven't received that specific guidance. Usually you get a really detailed document from the SBA that tells you how to structure the note and every part of it. We don't have that at this point. So we can do it the way we usually do business. We'll probably hold until Monday to make that decision. We're not going to hold forever.
So you're thinking as soon as Monday or Tuesday next week, people will actually start receiving funds?
Yep.
Awesome.
I have a personal professional goal of filling out a bunch of those big plastic fake checks and handing them over to.
I've been told that people are already receiving funds.
So, we'll be having those as soon as possible.
I'm sorry, Paul, you were saying?
I'm sorry. I've been told that people are already receiving the $10,000 under the EIDL loan program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had several clients apply for it. I don't know if they've actually received the check just yet, but they've been approved for it. So we're expecting it any day now. And Jim, any additional comments on that front?
I just wanted to mention that obviously the EIDL loan and the PPP program are separate. They can go hand in hand if money's advanced for it. And again, to reiterate with the EIDL, so once you get through that application process, you're given the option to have that up to $10,000 advance. So with that, the Treasury stating that you'll get it in 3 days. They ACH it to your deposit accounts, and that's yours to use. Whether you get approved for the EIDL, it will be put into that loan structure through the SBA. If you're denied for the EIDL, that $10,000 or how much becomes, they're saying, forgivable. And if you get approved for the $10,000 advance, and then you apply for the PPP and are approved for it, however much you're approved for a loan, you do take off that $10,000 from there, and net, that's the remaining outstanding, I guess.
All right. And so kind of moving on from that, obviously there's alternate financial opportunities here that people can do. Elizabeth, are you working with your business owners in any way to kind of give them some guidance on whether or not they should apply for the PPP program, or should they apply for the EIDL program, or something totally different?
It all depends on what their business is, where they are. The first thing that we did tell people to do is to reach out to their banks. And I've been seeing on the chat, there's some questions about if my bank says I need to have a line of credit. And I know that these rules are sort of a little bit loosey-goosey. And here in Haverhill, we have 2 great local banks on the line with us today. I would appreciate hearing from them what, if any, parameters that you're considering for businesses. Are you taking on any businesses that are not currently clients of yours?
So we have had a very high demand in this PPP program. So we're not turning down non-customers. We're letting them know that we're going to do as much as possible to help them out. But since the demand for our own customers has been so high, we are placing them first. But again, that doesn't mean we're turning anybody away. We want to try to help as many people as possible. So
Same answer on the part of Pentucket. We're taking all apps. We are backlogged already with our existing customers, and we're going to try to process those first. We're asking for a little bit more information from non-customers. We'd like to not just process a transaction here, but start a relationship. So we'd like to know a little bit more about their business and them than the SBA program itself in this case asks. So we kind of have two paths that they go down. If you're new to the bank, and we're just saying new, we'll take existing loan or deposit customers as existing customers. New to the bank entirely, we want to know a little bit more about you before we start the process.
So I got one. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
But Earl, to your point, cash flow is always king. That's the first part we start looking at. Do you have the cash flow on hand to withstand the next 6 months? Because this environment that we're in is not necessarily, I mean, it technically has economic impacts, but it's a healthcare crisis. Once we get beyond this, we want to make sure that our businesses are at the ready to ramp back up.
All right, so one of the things I just wanted to point out, and then I'd like to start taking some of the audience questions. When we sit down with our clients and we start doing a cash flow analysis and something significant like this is changing, we always start by kind of assessing, what's the range of revenue that's coming in and what their expectations are. What happens if it, what if this shelter in place, closing stores, et cetera, gets extended from April to May or May to June or whatever, so we can do some what if analysis for them and help them kind of understand how far that cash may stretch. And then the other thing we encourage them to do is really review their expenses and reach out to their lenders, their partners, their vendors, et cetera, and see what latitude they might have in terms of either delaying payments or doing something different. And I know a lot of the banks are working with their clients on that front. Jim, can you comment a little bit about what you might be doing to help people with an existing line of credit or term loan for that matter, in terms of maybe deferring payments or adjusting payment schedules, whatever it might be?
Absolutely. So it really varies based on the issue that's at hand. So nonprofits who have lines of credits, they're coming to us looking for increases in those due to the potential of not getting state government funding they typically get. And then you have commercial borrowers. So really depending on if their tenants are remaining to pay rent, then again, it's business as usual. However, with what's going on, these tenants are not able to. So we are weighing options of deferring interest, deferring principal and interest. And then again, with the regular business, like you said, it's just if they've been required to shut down, no fault of their own, then we're working with them to make sure that how this is handled. They're gonna be set up once this thing is done. So again, it's really handled on a case-by-case scenario, but again, we're taking as many calls as possible to help everyone out. So we are working with them, yes.
And Paul, any recommendations you might make to a business owner along those fronts?
Sure. A lot of the questions I'm getting are if my clients can apply for both the EIDL and the PPP. And the answer is yes, you can. You just have to be very careful. You can't use the funds for the same purposes. And the other thing you have to keep in mind is that the PPP program is for a very short period of time. It's for payroll, basically payroll between February 15th to June 30th. It does allow you to spend it for some other expenses, but the bulk of it's going to be used for payroll for that period of time. The EIDL loans go beyond that. Right. And based on the longevity of this virus epidemic, however long it goes, a lot of businesses won't recover by June 30th. Right. They're going to need money to go through the rest of the end of this year, maybe into next year. So that's why I encourage them to apply for both, especially with the $10,000 that they're giving you. But I do think they have to be careful in managing the funds and making sure that they're using the funds for separate and distinct purposes so that they don't end up with a commingling issue and therefore losing out on some of the forgiveness.
Yeah, and Paul, to that point, with our clients, we're actually setting up separate accounts on their chart of accounts, so we can manage the loans separately, and that any other funding that they might get separately, and that we can also monitor the usage. And just to put a clarifying point, from what I've read, 75% of those funds for the PPP loans should be used to cover payroll expenses. And if they do that, then they're going to be able to get it forgiven. I see John shaking his head yes in agreement. Yep. So it's very important, and we're telling all of our clients to make sure that they're tracking it separately, and that as we put that in place, that they can go in there and make sure that if they have the latitude of spending, making sure they rehire, maybe they furloughed somebody, they bring them back, whatever, making sure that they get that to 75%. And that's going to allow them to participate in the forgiveness aspect of it, and also keep them in compliance.
There are also a couple of other benefits that the government are implementing in addition to these that aren't really getting a lot of talk. But one of the benefits is a payroll tax deduction that is going to be allowed to be taken. And that's something that's, I guess, still coming to fruition. But there's also, I was told yesterday that if you have a 504 SBA loan, the SBA is going to pay your mortgage payment for the next 6 months. So that's huge, because there are a lot of small businesses out there that have these 504 loans. And so I was told that effective April 1st, they're making your mortgage payment for you on the 504 loan. And that's a really big deal. And I think people should be aware of that, because I don't think a lot of people are.
So let me get into a couple details that are coming in through the chat room. There's a lot of question about, and I've gotten this from my clients as well, and I've seen several questions in the chat room where independent contractors, so you're a single member LLC or equivalent, you're paying contractors that are maybe day workers doing certain jobs or 1099 employees. There was some wording that came out last night agreement that said that, and I think it was section H on that said that independent contractors are not included in this, but there's also conflicting wording in the agreement that says that when you're calculating your maximum amount and your wages, that you can include 1099 miscellaneous. John, actually, maybe I'll just start with Paul. Have you kind of wrestled down that and have any perspective on which supersedes the other?
I'll defer to John. I've been asked the same question and I've been working through it. It's my understanding that because if you're a sole proprietor, an independent contractor, you're actually not supposed to apply for the PPP till April 10th.
Right.
But the real question is, and I'll take my own scenario here at the firm, we have a lot of people on payroll, but then myself and the partners, we take a draw. So we're not technically on the payroll. And
Right.
I think that's a scenario where you get a lot of questions.
Yes.
And we've been told that we can file for the PPP now under the April 3rd deadline because we do have all that payroll. And even though ours is a draw, we do qualify under that. The other thing I think people need to be made aware of, and this is something that I know Jim and I had to work through earlier in the week, is there's the $100,000 cap. A lot of people are getting confused with. That doesn't mean that if you make over $100,000, you don't put that money in as part of the payroll. It's just you cap it at $100,000.
Right.
So if your pay through the business is 120, you wouldn't use 120 in the calculation. You just use 100,000. And I'll defer to John and Jim if they agree with that or not.
I had that same misconception from one of my clients earlier today, and we were able to help them work their way through that and get it filed properly.
Yeah.
John,
Paul,
any further comments on that?
Yeah, and it's interesting. Here we are. It's, I don't know, excuse me, maybe 18 hours after the SEOP is out. We are interpreting that sole props can apply now, and that really it's the independent contractors that cannot.
Right.
So that might be a follow-up item for us to reconcile. We've actually approved some today, so the system is applying them.
I'm going with sole proprietors as well.
Yeah, it's really the independent contractors that are excluded, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. And then, Paul, to your point about the owner's draw, just to clarify, so if you have a business that had a net income of $200,000 and the owners are taking a draw of 200, are they capping that at $100,000 for all of them? But if there was two partners, is it 200,000 that they're able to put in there, or is it 100,000?
I'll defer to John and Jim, but I'm interpreting it that's 100,000 each.
Okay, so that was my interpretation as well, John.
So Earl, could you make the question again? I think I know what you said, but I was reading a chat question.
Yep. So if you have two partners in the business and they're taking out $200,000 or over $200,000, is it capped at $100,000 each or 200,000, or is it capped at $100,000 for the business?
So you don't have to remove anyone's payroll. You don't remove all of the payroll for anyone being paid more than 100,000. You remove the portion above 100,000. We've been pretty clear on that in the SOP. Yep. So if someone's making 150, one is included in the eligible amount, 50 is excluded.
Right. But if there's two people in partnership, I assume it's 100,000 each that they can claim.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Everybody agree on that?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, good. And then the other part of that equation is if there's a big difference between an owner's draw and net income in a business. An owner can draw, disproportionate amount versus the income in the business. Are the guidelines clear on whether it should be draw or should it be the taxable income?
There's a lot of hesitation here, so that would give you an indication that they are unclear.
Right.
And so the way the loan eligibility is calculated, we're supposed to look at the average monthly payroll times 2.5. Monthly payroll times 2.5. The period of that payroll is it gets at your question. If you take a whole year payroll, divide it by 12, multiply by 2.5, you've done that. And if your draw falls in one of those months, it doesn't really matter which month it fell in. If you're taking a rolling average or something and that period of time excludes when that draw was taken, it's going to be missed and your loan amount would be smaller.
All right.
And there's significant gray area on the period of time where that calculation is being held. Some people are saying it's 2019 fiscal calendar year. Other people saying it's a rolling 12 months up till last month. I think it's gray area. We're taking what we have from the customer applications we get.
Yeah, and to that point, we've had advice coming in from various CPA firms that basically says calculate it both ways and just use whatever is most favorable because there's conflicting wording in the agreement or in the.
Yep, that's perfectly sound, I think, Earl. That's what we're doing.
Okay. Dugan, you've been monitoring the questions. Did you see any questions come up that you feel like we should make sure we capture there?
There was one that came through Facebook, and I just wanted to, again, I think it's been mentioned, but just to put a clear point to it, in terms of people applying for the PPP, do they have to go through their bank or do they do this online alone?
Through the bank.
Okay.
The PPP has to go through a bank. The EIDL, the Economic Impact Disaster Loan, has to go direct. You can't do either one the other way.
Got it.
And Elizabeth, question for you. So we go through all this exercise, the funds are running out, and for one reason or another, you're a business owner and you're not able to get your application approved for the PPP, whether it's a timing issue or for other reasons. What kinds of course of actions are you recommending to your clients?
Well, in that case, things are looking a little on the dire side because these programs are fairly liberal. But you can access your 401k funds. We don't like saying that. We're at sort of a down market at the time, but you can access 401k funds up to $100,000 with no, usually there's a 10% surcharge on top of that because if you're under age 59 and a half, they don't want you touching those funds. But you can take up to $100,000 and repay it over 3 years. So I would say in a worst case scenario, that is also a source of possible funds.
Yeah, and I think I would ask the question to the banks. I always encourage my clients to put lines of credit in place prior to these situations happening. But for those that haven't, is this a time where maybe it makes sense for them to put a line of credit in place or look at some other alternatives as well? Jim?
So, I mean, I'm not gonna, it's not a terrible idea. I mean, the last thing I want to do right now is over leverage individuals and come out of this with less cash flow than they went into it with. Mm-hmm. So you have that with the large queue of trying to process these funds. Again, it's an instance of maybe where they have one, increasing it, taking out a new one. I don't think these programs are put in place to not have to do that.
Right.
So whether you have, I mean, the Paycheck Protection Program, this is for organizations that it's structured toward payroll. And that's what people need to understand. You have to use 75% of it towards payroll or more. And then the remaining can be used for the rent, the mortgage interest, and the utilities. But again, there's going to be due diligence on the back end after this that the borrower is going to need to provide proof that those funds were used for what they said they were used for. And if those numbers don't add up, then there's going to be some debt that remains on their books. So the EIDL loan is there for anyone that is missed out on all of the other stuff. Right. So to take advantage of all the other operating expenses that were hit hard due to this, and to make up that loss in income. So that's how I would recommend it. And yeah. Again, it is a loan on the other one, but I think there's still a lot of gray area how that's going to be handled.
Okay.
Can I just add to that? I was
sure.
We did a seminar yesterday that was conducted by the SBA, and what I learned then was with the EIDL loan, if you file like today and get approved for that, you can hold on to that for 6 months. So you don't have to submit it and use it right now. So in essence, that can kind of act like an equity line. So it's good for 6 months once you get that approval. So let's say 4 months from now, you run into some more trouble. At that time, you can go ahead and use it as if you would an equity line of credit. So I think that's important for people to know too. And the other thing is, it's my understanding with the EIDL loans that for 6 months, you don't have to make the payments, that the interest does accrue, but no payments are due until after the first 6 months that you actually take the loan money.
That's my understanding as well. When I look at some of the other questions that are coming in, they're asking for some clarifications about the $10,000 under the EIDL loan and then approving it for the PPP. They did change that regulation a little bit yesterday when I read through it. Paul, you want to comment on how that works?
Well, I think John already, it was a Jim or John that addressed that said that if you did the $10,000 from the EIDL and then you weren't qualified for the loan, they would take the $10,000 off the number for the PPP. Is that what, I think that's what Jim said earlier. But like I said, I don't think that applies if you qualify for both. Could you clarify that, Jim? Maybe that's what they're talking about.
So what my interpretation from reading in the documents last night is that the $10,000 would be over and above the PPPL PPP as long as you use it for different purposes.
Different purpose, correct.
Right.
Okay.
Hey, Earl, can I just jump in real quick here?
Yes, please.
This will give you 30 seconds to just tee up the next question as you go through the different questions that are coming in here. Clearly, first of all, guys, thank you to all 5 of you for being very specific. And I know in a moment of real uncertainty, this is all happening real time. There's a lot of confusion. There's 1,000,001 nuanced questions here. And so thank you. I just wanted to put it out to our audience. It has been recommended that in a week or so, perhaps next Thursday, we will learn a lot more about how all of these different plans are operating. And so there's a chance that we'll come back here. So if you don't have the clarity that you're hoping for out of this conversation for whatever reason, we will most likely arrange for another one of these sessions probably as early as next week.
All right, thank you. And the next thing I wanted to address is, what if you've already furloughed your people? And when I read the regulations yesterday, it became much clearer. As long as the money spent during the covered period, which is up till June 30th, is 75% or more on payroll, then you're good. So if you've furloughed somebody, you don't need to hire them back, and you could still get the 75% of the spend on payroll expenses, then you don't need to take any action about bringing that person back. However, the whole point of this act is to try to bring those people back and get them employed. And the thought is the 75% number would in fact bring a lot of people back to work, which was the whole driver between the act in the first place. John, you want to comment on that any further?
Sure. The way I'm thinking about the program as it is evolving, and we've talked about this, I think, all the way through the call. There's the SOP that we got yesterday, talked about how to make the loan, how to qualify and make it. We need to figure out how to fund it and document it the next day or two. Then we need to figure out the details on the loan forgiveness. And that's a couple months out. So what we know at this point about the loan forgiveness is there's a numerator and a denominator to the formula, right? The denominator is your payroll leading up to the date of your application. So your average payroll, through I think February 15th. If I've got that wrong, it's because there's too many numbers in my head. When you sign the note and receive the funds, there's a specific date. The payroll that you make the next 8 weeks is the numerator. So the denominator is the previous payroll. The numerator is the ongoing payroll. A over B, if it equals 75%, say 75% of your loan is going to get forgiven. You don't have to pay it back. you'll owe 25%. You manage to work that through with the bank. I think we're generally putting those on a 2-year term, 1% interest. It's a pretty good deal. So basically, the whole point, as Earl states, of the bill is to keep people employed. And the more people you keep employed, the more forgiveness you get out of the original amount. So don't get confused on the 75%. That's a threshold to actually get included in the whole program. The forgiveness amount could be anything from 100% down to 5%, depending on the numerator compared to the denominator.
Right.
I don't know if that's making sense. It's a lot of numbers.
Yeah, I think it was pretty clear. Thank you, John. And I think from my standpoint, one of the reasons for us wanting to do it as employers is we just came off of a record low unemployment rate forever. We are all struggling to get talented people. We have no idea what the impact is going to be going forward, but none of us want to have to go through the process of losing some talented people. And if we can use this by bringing them back off of furlough, et cetera, and use this to help protect those jobs for the next 8 weeks. And if we are able to open up our doors and start servicing clients again, then maybe that's enough to make sure you don't lose those talented people.
Yep,
So
agree.
I think to me, there's a big HR element here that we want to make sure that, taking my accounting hat off and putting on my business owner hat, I don't want to lose talented people. So we want to make sure we do everything to protect that. And I think
Can
if you,
I just add to the forgiveness
Sure.
discussion?
Yep.
I think the other thing that's important for people to know that are applying for this, for the money that's not forgiven, you're only paying 1% interest on the money, and you have up to 2 years to pay it back.
Yep.
So it's still a great deal. You're not gonna beat it.
Sure.
And money over 350,000 is actually a 0.5%. So it's really, it's basically just paying the money back over time without any real interest or charges. So I wouldn't get too hung up on the forgiveness. We know that a big chunk of it is going to be forgiven, if not all of it. But if it doesn't all get forgiven, it's still a great deal.
Yep. So there's a couple specific questions in the Q&A here. And one of them talks about reimbursement for staffing costs through the PPP for nonprofit organizations. And maybe someone once asked that, answer that question in more general terms, but then also they were asking specifically about cost reimbursement contracts with the state and federal governments. Is anybody familiar enough with that piece of it to want to address that question?
Well, I'll give it a shot. Jim, Paul, I don't know if you've read anything either. I have not seen anything that's restricting government contract. The whole calculation of eligibility and forgiveness is based on payroll.
Right.
It's not based on really on revenue or how you derive that revenue. I have seen no limitations. It's a good question because generally the government programs do specify certain requirements out of government contracts. So I understand probably where the question's coming from. I've seen no restrictions on it in any of the SOPs. I don't know if anyone else has. Really good question.
So if there is a new SOP, that's probably going to be one of the first ones on it. I have not seen anything. So I'm telling any agency that's getting reimbursement from state government funds, I'm having them fill out the entire amount because, like John said, there's nothing there. There's no fine print. So I mean, it goes back to the whole, I guess, reason for this program, to keep people on staff. These people, they have kept people on staff. They're still on their payroll, so they should be able to take advantage of it just like anyone else.
I agree with that. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is kind of what we just talked about. Even if there is an issue with those contracts and they do get that money, and let's say they do have to give it back and it's not forgiven, it's still, there's a mechanism for that. There's still a good deal on the money. They just give the money back once they get reimbursed.
Right, and that goes back to, so when organizations are getting these funds, I'm recommending that they set up a separate deposit account with these funds. They use it all for payroll. If they reach that 75%, great. But again, I want them using all of this for payroll just in case something changes. And then at the end of the day, the SBA says, well, this is going to be a loan. This is not forgiven. They just, whatever's left, they just pay it back. Or if they don't mind the 1%, they go with the 1% for 2 years. So Again, and I think that's what a lot of banks and agencies are doing right now.
Earl, can I jump in real quick with a
Sure.
question? This question's partially inspired by Pentucket Bank's burning the midnight oil last night. You guys were there until 2 o'clock trying to sort of do this because the PPP program began at midnight, technically speaking, or perhaps non-technically speaking.
That was a theoretical start,
Right.
Duke, but we tried.
But there is a finite amount of money for the country to participate in this program. And so there is a time of the essence element that is, I think, very much noteworthy. Do you have any of you have any real perspective on that? Should we be running to our banks by 4 o'clock today? Do we have till next week? Is there any, I understand if this isn't an answer has a question that has a possible answer, but any insights there for people?
Well,
Jim, you want to go first? Or any of you guys
so
go first?
I mean, I've heard, sorry, Paul.
Until the funds end. It does say that in the legislation.
Right.
It does. It said first come, first serve, but I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing that they're going to allow for other funds from the 2 trillion to be used for the Small Business Administration, or if that's not possible, come up with a second stimulus bill just directed towards SBA funding. So, John, I don't know if you've heard anything different.
I've heard all the same things. And I'm a skeptic reading internet sources. People saying it's going to run out by tonight. Who knows? It might take weeks. It is generally I think most banks are dealing on a first, FIFO basis, first in, first out. I think it's really the only fair way to do it. So, you want to get in line. We're doing them as fast as we can. They're slower than we thought. It's taken, I've done a couple of them myself just to figure it out too. I was doing one right before this call. It might take us, all in a couple hours to get from the beginning to the end on each deal. And we got 7 lenders and 300 of them queued up already. So do the math. I do see it running out. There's so much political pressure around the whole thing. You could imagine it would probably get refunded if it's a success, but you can't necessarily count on it. So we're making it up, Dugan. It's a non-answer. It's a long non-answer.
They're just calling Pentucket Bank or Haverhill Bank, or if like me, they have a relationship with, the lender itself. They're just emailing that person saying, here's my form. And then it really requires sort of a human transaction element from within the bank.
Yes and no. We've got it set up that you can do the entire process from the website to a specific email address set up inside the bank for it, and that essentially forms our queue. Generally, though, you're right, it forms our queue for people that don't have a lending relationship with a human. Right. Most of our existing customers have those human relationships.
Yeah, and I think, to me, one of the values that we like to see with our client base is to build that kind of relationship with a local bank wherever you possibly can. And if you just have a transactional operational account type of relationship with a bank, it's hard to get in the front of that queue or get in the queue even when you get in these types of situations. So there's a lot to be said for working with the local banks, and these times just make that even more apparent. Did you have any other questions in the chat room, Dugan, that you saw that I may have overlooked that you felt like we should bring up?
Here, just reading the one that just came in. Is it more advisable to use the employee retention credit, which could be $5,000 per employee annually if you have 3 or more employees, than to get the $10,000 for the EIDL, assuming you don't need loan funds beyond the $10,000?
I think that's a very much it depends question.
So when I'm under I'm understanding that, I mean, the $10,000, just because you get it advanced right at the start or within 3 days, I think you have to get turned down for it to become forgivable. If you get accepted, I mean, that $10,000 is still a loan, and tell me if I'm wrong.
So I thought I saw provisions in there that it was forgivable. So.
Oh, it is all forgivable now. Okay.
The $10,000, not the whole loan, but the $10,000.
Right.
I think we've all seen that, and I don't think there's any part of either of the loan programs that's less clear and more gray than that one.
Right.
The language that I've seen, and I've posted it up to a couple of the questions here, talks about an immediate grant that's forgivable. But there's really no specificity about how the SBA is going to determine who's eligible for that or not, and whether some people will get that instead of loan proceeds, in addition to loan proceeds, whether it's all loan and no grant or the other way around. There's no clarity on that that I've seen. I would guess that the SBA has it internally because they're making those loan decisions, but they don't have to publish those SOPs because it's them doing the process.
Right.
So that I think they're doing a good job under an incredibly tough circumstances. They've been working long hours like the rest of us.
So Dugan, I think part of the reason I said it depends is I think they need to look at their overall cash flow requirements and what their overall needs are. And that $10,000 credit versus the size of their payroll and how much they might get from a PPP loan, it could be dramatically different. A couple of loan payments we are in the process of applying for right now, rather, they're hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're not $10,000, right? So it really depends on the company, the size of the company, and doing the math and seeing what is most effective for that particular client and whether or not they get the loan. If they don't get the PPM or the PPP loan, then there's that opportunity then to potentially enjoy those credits.
There's a couple of questions that just, again, I think that we touched on these in a number of different ways, but I'll just try to ask a blanket one that covers a bunch of these things. So with respect back to contractors, independent contractors, 1099 employees, are there any other benefit programs beyond EIDL perhaps or PPP that have surfaced that 1099 folks with 1099s would uniquely qualify for?
Elizabeth?
Sole proprietors and 1099 would be eligible for unemployment. And also if you're partly employed, there's our Senator Zoglia this morning mentioned, it's called the Work-Share program, where you'd be eligible for sort of a partial unemployment benefit. The idea is with the PPP is that we want to keep people with their medical benefits, but if that's not going to be possible, especially if you're 1099, you may not have that sort of benefit already. Unemployment is always an option, which hadn't been the case prior to this.
And true independent contractors, they do have the opportunity to file for the PPP program as well, as my understanding, next week. Right, Paul?
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. And that's kind
Yeah,
of
so sole proprietors, we can start submitting those the 10th, April 10th.
Right. And I think there are also a lot of the gig economy type of employees that are coming in and they're just working for a day or something. They're getting a 1099 for those. Like I have several clients that are in the event management world and they hire people for the day jobs and they do 1099s on them. So those are employees that are getting hit pretty hard that normally would not have been eligible for unemployment, but I believe are now.
Can I ask another question, sort of logistics related? So we know that people, small business owners, 1099s, if they have questions or if they're going to submit for the PPP, they have to go through their bank, their lender. And different institutions have different ways of interacting. As John, you pointed out, most customers of community banks have some sort of a personal relationship, and that's certainly the best way to do it. I'm just sort of acknowledging, we have banks are the whole pipeline to getting these funds into the accounts of small business owners is going to take some time. Are there any other best practices that we should point out to people? There's just so many hours in the day that a community bank can respond to hundreds and hundreds of people. Are there pipeline issues that we should be prepared for? And if so, are there any other ways that folks should consider getting information if, in fact, going right to the person you have a relationship at the local bank is is it just taking that person a long time to get back to you just simply because they're backlogged?
Fair question, Dugan, and I'm going to guess every bank has a similar but somewhat different answer and process for that. We actually highly reluctantly told our lenders to stay heads down on the deals they had in pipeline today and not go to email and phone. And that's a hard thing to do. We're all about making sure you get that immediate response. But if we're on the phone and email all day, none of the stuff that got in last week gets done. What we did to supplant that is tried the best we could to make our website functional and very simple. Is how to apply. You click 3 places, fill it out, send it in. And my guess is, all banks have or are working on a kind of similar thing. We got to be as digital as we can so we can apply our humans to the things that have to be done with the humans. We've had some, and I'm going to be as polite as I can. I'll be as politically correct as possible. We've had a lot of small business owners kind of be, oh, do it. You have to. We can't hold hands. Instructions are there. You gotta bear down, fill the stuff out, and send
Hey,
it
John,
in.
I'm sorry. Can you back up 4 or 5 seconds? You cut out.
I did. Okay. It was probably a stroke of genius somehow, or an angel on my shoulder.
Something politically correct. And
I probably was saying something. Yeah, I was probably saying something I shouldn't. I do that a lot. We really need small business owners, applicants, to bear down on the details and do them themselves. We've had a bunch of people say, oh, won't you just do it for me? Nope, we won't. We can't. If we're filling out applications for customers, we're not approving them for anybody. And it's not that hard. You got to bear down, read the instructions, fill them out, and send them in. And I would guess that every bank in the country is saying the same thing.
And to that point,
Thank you,
what we've
John.
been
Yes.
advising our client is we work with them, we make sure we have all that information in place so we can go in there and make sure that it's as easy for the bank as possible to say yes.
The other
Right,
thing,
and the good thing is you have a lot of CPAs, you have a lot of payroll companies they're really working really hard right now to help their customers get the bank the correct information. So again, if you're having trouble doing it yourself, reach out to them, reach out to the payroll companies, and
Yep.
they're there.
Great
for
point, Jim. Yeah. If you really can't get it done, then get some help. And it can't always come from your bank because we're buried in getting the ones that are in done. Just to put a point on it, I hate this, but we probably over the weekend we're working paper, and we have 4 bins.
John, we're losing you again, man. Sorry.
All right, we have 4 bins. We've reverted to paper, unfortunately, just for over the weekend until we get it cleared out. We have pending review. We have approved and ready for input. We have input and approved by the SBA. And we have this other bin, which is unfortunately the biggest one, incomplete. They're sitting there, and we're going to get to them and email questions back to applicants. Don't be in the incomplete bin. Be in one of the other bins that we can actually handle.
to what we're talking about though, if you go to the SBA site, if you advise people to go there, there's a lot there. And with the EIDL loans, those are all processed directly through the SBA, not the local banks. So I think a lot of the people that are asking these questions need to understand the PPP programs is directly through the banks. And the EIDL program is through the SBA. And if you go to the SBA website, the application process has been greatly streamlined. They really did, it's boiled down to the nitty gritty. And I believe up to $25,000 of the EIDL loan, they don't even require personal guarantees or documentation. You just basically fill out the application and submit it, and they'll get back to you with an offer within a few days. So I would recommend people go to the SBA site too to get a lot of the information that they need if they can't reach their local bankers.
Yep. And Dugan, I see that we're about to the time limit here. I always recommend to our clients that they have a brain trust, a board of advisors of one form or another. And generally that should include their business attorney, their CPA, and maybe somebody that understands their area, their business really well. And now more than ever, they should be really reaching out to their brain trust and making sure they're getting good advice, not just about these particular loans, but how to weather the storm, get through this, position themselves for success coming out the other end. And it's a lot easier to do that if you have a sounding board of people that you've already developed that knowing relationship. And if you don't have that, reach out, start building that relationship with the appropriate people. Talk to your CPA, and make sure that you're getting good advice from your board of advisors as well.
And the last thing I'll say is, so if you do get approved for funds and funds are advanced on the PPP, there is going to be a time when the bank comes back around asking for proof of the usage of funds. So just make sure you keep that data trail that everything was used for payroll, and then the difference was used for the other 3 options. So again, just be very concise with that.
A very good point. Everyone wants the forgiveness and is focused on that. You got to be able to prove, we talked about the numerator and the denominator. You're going to have to be able to prove the numerator in order to get the forgiveness.
And generally that's going to mean pulling payroll reports directly from your payroll provider. If you're using one, if you're paying it for yourself, you're going to have to really document it well.
Yeah, it should be the same basis that you use to apply for the loan so that it's clean.
Yep.
Now, one thing that I'm hearing, and you guys can confirm or not, but I'm hearing that they're looking at the prior year's payroll for the same period. So in other words, if you're applying these funds between April and June, they're going to look at your payroll from April to June of 19 to make sure you're not, exceeding that by a lot. And I've also been told that they are giving you a little wiggle room that you can increase it by up to 25%.
Our interpretation on that, Paul, is similar. I think they're going to allow 2 different methodologies. You can do pre-loan and post-loan, right before and right after. Or if you're a seasonal business and that would hurt you, you can do, same period this year and last year.
Yeah.
So there's 2 different interpretations. I think they're both correct.
I know that our panel probably need to jump simply to processing more loans, but
or napping.
Or napping, right?
Yes.
Exactly. Listen, I want to thank Earl. Thank you, and to Supporting Strategies for moderating this. I know that you have been a resource to the chamber for helping us do a cash flow analysis. I believe that's a service that you're offering other customers of Supporting Strategies, and that's been really helpful to us. So thank you for that, and also thank you for moderating the panel. Elizabeth Brady, John Doust, Paul Magliochetti, Jim Hennebree, thank you guys all for being part of this conversation today. There's feels like we've responded to a few needles in a stack of needles, and I'm sure there'll be more to come. But clearly, I think some of the major takeaways are these are applications that should be handled soon. That as a small business owner, it's all up to us to really become educated on what we need to do. Do not look to our lenders to go through the nuts and bolts of this with us. I think we really need to do our homework ourselves. The chamber I put ourselves in the same exact position as a small organization, and then really have this thing ready to go and handed to the banks to our best ability, so they can process it without actually having to go through and make corrections. Otherwise, it will, as John had mentioned, there will be, it will probably be delayed in some way, and to move expeditiously on this. So, any final comments from the panel before I return everybody to their beautiful Friday afternoon here?
So Dugan, I assume you're going to get follow-up questions, so you have a vehicle for them to get answered, if you will.
Yeah, and thanks, Earl. First of all, we've recorded this conversation, and we will also record the questions and answer portion of it as well. It'll live on our social media and the Chamber's website. We do have a COVID section of our website as well. You can find it easily by just going to haverhillchamber.com. We've also got a number of other programs that are very much specifically focused on supporting local businesses, restaurants, other retail. You can check those out at haverhillchamber.com too. My email is dugan@haverhillchamber.com or info@haverhillchamber.com. if you do have specific questions about any of these questions, where the chamber can answer them, we will. Where we can't, we'll do our very best to get the answers for you. Yeah.
Dugan, thank you again for putting this together, and thank you for anyone listening. And we're here to help. Just work with us, please.
Yeah, same here. Dugan, if you can leave I don't know if it's possible to leave the Q&A open. I've been trying to answer as we go. There's a couple left. I'd be glad to hang on and
Yep, we'll
try
leave
to
this
type them
meeting
out.
open.
Very
We'll
good.
leave it open until everybody's gone.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the video, but I'll keep the Q&A going for a while.
Dugan, thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.
Stay
Thanks,
well.
everybody. We're all in this together. Hang in there.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a
Take
great
care.
day and stay healthy.
Dugan,
Elizabeth.
we're going to be pushing out a series of webinars geared towards small businesses. Can we put a link on the Haverhill Chamber website?
If you want to email that to us, Elizabeth, we'll put it on our social media, and yeah, perhaps send it to me. And if it makes sense, we'll also put it on our COVID-19 page.
That'd be great. There's just a lot of information coming out, and this was fantastic, but it was very granular, and I think a lot of businesses are still just trying to figure out which way is
Totally. We have a local section on our COVID-19 page, which is really trying to be, so we've got everything from the CARES Act that the president signed all the way down to, individual forms and programs and individuals and people and groups in Haverhill that can help. So
Great.
shoot that my way.
We're planning it this weekend, so hopefully on
Great.
Monday I'll see you guys.
Great.
And Earl, thank you. That was fantastic.
Thank you. Good to see you.
See you too.
All right. Thanks, Dugan.
Thank you, Earl.
Thanks for just